Well, the New York Times ran a piece this weekend attacking homeowners for the sin of wanting some control over their own neighborhoods. The article focused on Houston, where residents successfully petitioned their city to block the construction of a large, publicly funded low-income apartment block. Now, policymakers love low-income housing. It makes them feel virtuous, like nothing else, like they're doing something good, even if they aren't. Landlords, of course, love it too because it makes them rich. People who are forced to live nearby, however, have a very different view. Government housing almost never makes your neighborhood better, which is why affluent liberals like Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama live nowhere near it and never will. Crime tends to increase along with drugs and signs of decay. It's tough on local schools, too. Residential property values often fall significantly. Now, none of this is an attack on people who live in public housing, of course. Most of them probably don't want to be there either. But there's no use in lying about it. Housing projects hurt neighborhoods in a bunch of ways, and there's nothing immoral about saying it. It's just true. And if it was your neighborhood, a place you'd worked hard to move to so your family could have a better life, you'd probably say it too, no matter what color you are. Again, you don't see Obama living next to the projects. Maxine Waters lives in one of the richest zip codes in Los Angeles. So there's always a strong reaction from citizens when some bureaucrat decides this or that neighborhood isn't diverse enough and tries to put low-income housing or a homeless shelter in next door. But the complaining may soon end because, according to the New York Times, several U.S. senators have introduced a bill that would ban local communities from getting in the way of any of this, of the massive social engineering projects that might affect them. At that point, if that happens, the federal government will be able to do whatever they want to your neighborhood. It's easier that way. Less democracy, less fuss. And you? Well, you can just be quiet, Mr. Bigoted Middle American. It's for diversity, so don't ask questions. Don Calloway is a former Missouri state representative, and he joins us tonight. Don, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Tucker. Happy
look,
Fourth.
I think happy Fourth. You got to look. There are people who need assistance with housing, and I'm not against it. And you got to put them somewhere. But it does. 2 points I would make. One, it seems totally unfair to tell homeowners they have no right to a voice in that discussion because it really affects neighborhoods. That's a real thing, and all the virtue signaling in the world can't cover that up. It's real. So how dare the U.S. Congress try and tell homeowners they can't veto projects that affect them?
Well, ultimately, Tucker, the Department of Housing and Urban Development is the one of our several agencies in the government, executive agencies that is, that has a per se mission and charter to integrate housing in this country, and is for the express written purpose in its charter of eradicating housing segregation. So that is one way to consider it, is by allowing mixed use and mixed income developments to be put in areas of the country that are not segregated to just simply the geographic areas that we've limited them to, which necessarily force poor people to live amongst themselves in poor communities.
Well, I'm a little confused.
Which is necessarily segregation.
First of all, hold on, slow down. The government is not forcing anyone to live anywhere. There's no law forcing anyone to live anywhere. But
we've incentivized.
But hold on, let me just say, this only seems to work one way. So I don't see, if integration is the goal of federal housing policy, I don't see the feds moving affluent white people into poor black neighborhoods. That's called gentrification, and we're against that. Aren't we against that? I thought we're supposed to be against that. All good liberals are. But it does work the other way? Tell me why that's a good idea.
I don't just run with the proposition that gentrification is necessarily a bad thing. It's revitalized urban agendas and urban neighborhoods throughout this country. But to the other question about it necessarily being about integration, that's not necessarily it. HUD has the charter of integrating housing as well as helping to eradicate poverty across the board. It is very hard to carry out a mission of poverty eradication if you're forcing people to live into necessarily segregated neighborhoods among themselves. Let's put the fair back in fair housing. Now, yes, neighborhoods should have something to do with that. But if we can show that, if you can make a showing that there would be positive value of a mixed income community, I think that's something that all neighborhoods should consider. Perhaps not be forced upon them. I haven't read the Senate bill that you've referenced. I'm not saying the government should force it on them. But neighborhoods should consider integrating. Nobody is forcing anyone to, wait, slow down. No. What we're saying as a society is, if you can't afford housing, we'll pay for it. Tax dollars will pay for it. We're not forcing you to take it. There's no force involved here. Second, why is it fair for someone who's working really hard, maybe multiple jobs, to move his family into a safe neighborhood with good schools, and then part of his taxes are going to pay for someone else to live in that same neighborhood, potentially making it worse? Like, why is that fair? I don't understand. Tucker, your assumption is based upon the idea that people who are living in subsidized housing or in poor neighborhoods are necessarily a bad element and would bring that element to other neighborhoods. There is substantial value to mixed income communities throughout this country, and we see that right here in D.C., where you and I live. We see it in St. Louis, my original hometown, and in many of the gentrified areas where you spoke about. We have people of varying incomes living in peace and harmony right next to each other, and we've all, as Americans of all political stripes and all race and gender stripes or any other demographics, have fundamentally declared war against the poor in this country. We continue to advocate these ideas that the poor, people are poor because they're stupid or lazy or that they don't deserve anything better.
I'm never going to make this. Stop with it. You're arguing a point that I haven't raised and don't believe. I don't think poor people are bad. I don't think everyone in public housing is bad. I don't think they're criminals. I'm not making any kind of generalization like that, but I'm looking at the numbers and I'm reaching a database conclusion, which is if you have a large cluster of public housing units in your neighborhood, crime goes up, schools get worse. It's just true. It's not an attack on anybody. I feel sorry for people. I've had a lot of experience with this, and I'm not attacking those people. I'm just saying there's a cost. Let's stop lying about the cost.
Let's take it out of that. Then what is the problem with spreading out mixed and lower income housing developments, integrating them into communities which are not necessarily low income? Wouldn't that be better if they lived among people who were not necessarily low income? Wouldn't it be better if they had access to schools?
Better for whom?
If they had access to schools who were
better for whom?
Better for poor people and helping to lift them out of poverty, Tucker.
It might be. Hold on, slow down. It might be.
You're right. It might be. It would be great.
What about the other people who live there?
You're assuming that living among poor people degrades the neighborhood, and it doesn't. Excuse me, degrades neighborhoods, and it doesn't.
I'm not assuming that at all. I'm making a date. Actually, you're wrong. You're wrong on this point.
Said it
and I'm not saying living among poor people degrades anybody. I'm just saying that the stats show really clearly if you have a big cluster of public housing, not just poor people, living in government-subsidized housing, there's a difference.
A big cluster. And what we're talking about in the Galleria in Houston, and what we're talking about throughout the country in urban redevelopment is the idea of mixed income. People of all income levels, people who are not necessarily socioeconomically similarly situated, living
Here's
together.
What bugs me. Right, I get it. I get the dream, and it's been a dream for 50 years, and I'm not opposed to that dream because I'm for integration. Unlike most people on the left, I'm very uncomfortable with historically black universities because they're not diverse. No, I'm serious. I'm for integration. So I'm not against that, but I am saying that the people who live there have a right to have a different view, and it doesn't make them bigots. So will you just concede as a final note that they're not?
Nobody's saying whatsoever that
the fair housing people are. You're a bigot. You just don't like people who look different from you. That's
Tucker, I certainly haven't. You and I always have good discussions, and I haven't said that they're bigots. I'm saying that there is substantial value to potentially looking at mixed income communities around the country, and it's unfortunate that HUD has decided not to help further that mission.
Hasn't worked very well. And Don, thank you very much.
Hey, thanks, Tucker.
Up next, a new poll shows that those on the political left are far less likely to say they are proud of the country they live in. Is America becoming more anti-American because of that? We'll discuss with Charles Gradhammer next.